Welcome to another episode of As Chess Recommends. Today we are going to start our Fellini journey by discussing Fellini's Satyricon, one of his weirdest films, if not his most weird film, but actually my favorite one as well. And I'm one of the rare people who can say that I've seen all of Fellini's films, all the 2 dozen films, and I'm pretty proud of that achievement, to be honest. But yeah, it was fun to go through those films like some years ago. And I actually think that Fellini has like a very stellar filmography from start to finish. So there aren't any films that I don't like. I think even the worst ones are still like 7 out of 10 type of like pretty good films, and then the best are some of the best films of all time. But this is an adaptation, a loose adaptation of a Petronius novel called Satyricon, which I haven't read, but I want to read it at some point, especially as I'm quite interested in that time period, not in that far right way, but just in a curious way. Yeah. But so this film is like a very different film to his other films. This is like a pretty much a kind of non-narrative film. I mean, it kind of has a narrative, but it's so fragmentary and weird, and it's kind of hard to grasp. But it's one of those kind of art gallery films that all of these shots are so perfect, and you kind of have like a perfect collection of nice shots. But of course, we are going to talk about the aesthetic a lot later. And this seems to be a film that, yeah, there are some people who love it as much as me, but I think most people don't like really love it. If you look at Letterboxd, many people have given it like 3 stars, 3.5 stars, and not that many people have given it 5 stars. But you can find those reviews that of people who absolutely love this type of stuff, like I do. But we'll see what Altaz thought of it. So now I'm gonna ask Altaz, what did you think of this film?
Obviously, when you start watching the film, you're like, I love the way it opens. But then you go in the journey, and of course, it's the what do you think is what's going on kind of thing. And then there's the aha. And yeah, I'm going to give it that M label. I'm going to give it a masterpiece label. Because I really think that's what it is. It's just truly unique in what it's trying to do. And it's it's a perception you don't usually get, and it's very perceptive, and it's very it's saying something even though you don't think it's saying anything, and so I'm excited to discuss it with you, because obviously we're both fans of classics and stuff like that, and so this is going to be fun.
I think Fellini describes it as his homosexual odyssey or something like that.
Yeah.
It's a very queer film, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
but just like was the time period was that as well to a large degree. So it's very interesting. But how could we start this discussion? I guess we should talk about who would like this film, and I'm really glad that Altaz liked it, because this is one of those films that when you recommend it to somebody, you have no idea how they will react, because it's that type of film. But I'm glad that Altaz got into it. But yeah, this is very hard to recommend to people. I think people who like painting, who like history, literature, who like weird films, I would like this one. And people who like films that experiment with the narrative, again, films that don't go from point A to point B clearly, but have these like weird fragmentary narratives. That's basically what I said with Celine and Julie go boating as well. So in a way, these are very similar films. Although I like Satyricon quite a bit more, as it is one of my like big favorites. It would be definitely in my top 100, maybe even top 50. It's hard to say. And I've now seen it 3 times, and every time I've really loved it. And it was my favorite Fellini film since the first watch. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would also recommend it to people who like that almost pulpy B grade aesthetic, even though the film is doing much more in some ways. But if you're attracted to that kind of aesthetic and weirdness, you will enjoy it. So it depends on the different levels at which you can enjoy this film. But I think people like that kind of stuff will really enjoy it. And then if you are curious as to if you have read the Odyssey or you like the story of the Odyssey and you're wondering what it would look like as just a mad fever dream, this is worth your curiosity. But it is one of those things that I can see, and I could see why you were nervous, because I was watching it. I'm like, it's one of those things that you could see someone getting really angry at you for suggesting it. Like, why are you subjecting me to this? And I even thought of people who've seen other Fellini. Like, I've only seen Lestrada, The Ship Sails On, so I haven't seen that much Fellini. But I'm like, if people are like watching a classical Fellini and then they're like, oh, this is Fellini, and then they put it on. I mean, you gotta like admire Fellini's guts. He's just like, I don't basically care what you think. Like, you could have liked my earlier stuff, but we're gonna go on the journey. I want to go on a journey today, so I'm not worried about completely ruining my name, which is a kind of courage that just very few artists have.
And I was saying to Altaz in the pre-chat that David Lynch and Fellini were friends towards the end of Fellini's life, and I think you can see that this film probably has influenced David Lynch, because it's again weird and kind of all over the place and over the top in many ways. So I think Lynch would probably like this film, and I'm sure that he has seen it. But yeah, that's a very interesting connection, how Lynch and Fellini got to be friends, and yeah, they are both such like eccentric artists, so I can see why they would be good friends. And I'm a big fan of both of them, so yeah.
And there's something like really interesting, because after I watched The Ship Sails On, I read this interview with Fellini, and he was saying, "Oh, I used opera in this in The Ship Sails On, and I never basically revealed any interest in opera early in my films, because it seems like very cliche and like on the nose. Oh, I'm Italian, and I'm going to bring like opera into my films." And here in The Ship Sails On, and especially in this film, he takes opera to a whole new level, because this film is opera as well, even though you could be seeing the visuals and everything and not realize it's opera. Like you said, the scale of it, the melodrama, the dramatization, the intensity of everything that's going on, whether it's visual, sound, like set design, like everything. It's opera. It's that grandeur. What grandeur of insanity! I mean, it's an incredible piece of art, I think.
Yeah, we can move into the spoilers now, even though again it's not the type of film that you really care about spoilers. But yeah, we can start about the aesthetic. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about with that. The film has like incredible costume design and incredible sets, incredible color palette with lots of red, lots of incredible painterly shots, very methodical visuals, and we see all kinds of different people here wearing all kinds of different costumes, and again they are just all great, but this just works so well as a visual piece, and it kind of really shows you the potential of cinema. It's just that level of good in terms of the visuals, and yeah, it's one of my absolute favorite films. If I ranked films only based on the aesthetic, this would rank very highly, maybe even in top 10. And I think it's Fellini's best looking film too. So
Yeah, I like the aesthetic. Obviously, like I said, the aesthetic in some ways it's like stage grand stage, because it's like a lot of sets rather than, obviously you have the ability to even use actual historic sites and stuff like that, but instead it's done as a stage. Very interesting choice. and then the design is very colorful, which in this film I think is really important and would get missed, that this film is actually a history film, even though someone might think I'm insane for saying that. But the color plays into that, because a lot of the things we see in Rome and this aesthetic of, no color, what people, the thing is that this is because you've seen the color has all been worn off those things. It used to be very colorful, like those statues and stuff are colored and they were painted and all that. So, and Fellini understands that, so he's creating this very vivid, like saturated, like intense, even in terms of color and emotion. It's that it adds to the intensity. It's yeah, it looks amazing. Yeah.
I don't know how we are gonna start approaching the themes and the narrative, like where to start. I've always struggled to talk about this film. Of course, there's this kind of a love triangle. This guy has this boy slave, and then there's this other guy who wants to take him away, and then these people like reappear in the film, but it's all very fragmentary. And
I
yeah, I
mean,
don't know like where we start.
for me, the most powerful thing in the film is the debunking of the understanding of that period, or the general understanding of that period, or how we see one thing without the other. So you obviously you have the great works of classical literature behind you, for this discussion. And I think what spoke to me the most is, so I was watching this film and I immediately got the feeling that, yeah, like we are a form of, human beings are a form of alien and mutant on the earth. When you look at how most of nature works, or how nature works in general, and other animals and stuff like that, and how we operate, uh we don't seem to kind of fit the picture. And I was very interested to read what Fellini said, that this film is, he's studying Rome as if it was an alien uh, culture, or an alien society, because it very much is an alien society. So I think the theme that speaks out to me the most, and to me the most compelling part, that changed the film from just being insanity and madness to a beautiful construction, is that key, that the fact that he's actually taking to the world and saying, look at the whole picture without seducing you. So we've had a lot of stories about Rome where you have these like callous emperors, and these sexual proclivities, and then but showing it in a very beautiful, attractive way, so almost seducing you, where he is showing you the madness of it all, right? The superstition, the reading like ridiculous things for signs about what's going to happen to your fortune, um, the kind of depravity, the disparity, uh, the insanity, but also the acceptance of things that we would find completely abhorrent in our current time with our current mores, are completely acceptable. So, as we see all these things that are constantly going back to Western civilization and celebrating Western thought and civilization, we very rarely look at that in the context of the whole. And I think this is what makes this into a masterwork. Fellini is saying, look at the whole picture. Don't just create a distorted history that just supports some of your arguments. Really think about who those people were and what they thought and how they behaved, and the kind of things they thought was okay, the kind of cruelty that was seen as perfectly fine, and really assess the whole. And then you'll find a very strange place. And that strangeness reflects what may be deep down within each of us as well, which is scary.
Yeah, this film really takes the kind of glory out of the Roman Empire, And we also see like all these people, like how like awful people they are and how they are scheming and lying, but this film doesn't do that in that kind of dramatic thriller type of way that your average Rome story shows you, where you see like these scheming politicians and then you are like, oh, how can he be so smart and things like that. But here we see that in a more kind of pedestrian level, that cruelty and again scheming and lying, and it takes all the drama, all the glory, all the intrigue away from it. But then as it takes all that glory away from it, that kind of becomes a style of its own and story of its own. Just like with like Robert Bresson, the films, we say that they don't have a style, but the fact that they don't have a style is a style itself. So yeah, I really agree what you just said there, that yeah, we usually see Rome in this beautiful, amazing way, and people say, why can't we be like that? That philosophers walking on the streets and men were so manly and things like that, but they were so tough, they were conquering everybody. Like, that's so great. And that's why I said in the beginning that, yeah, I like Roman history, but not in that right-wing way, who actually, people who want to go back to that and have those strict hierarchies and stuff. Obviously, I don't want that, but I think the time period is just very interesting in general, not in the way that I want that, but just that it's very interesting. Yeah,
Absolutely, and it's a whole unique perspective to show you destructive human tendencies and emotions with their true ugliness. So like, right, that's why I'm like, it's opera, but it's unopera, because opera can often have this theme of jealousy, right, and fear of infidelity, and lovers doing each other wrong. But here it's real ugly and it's real nasty, like a friend, first of all, it's already wrong because it's like starting with, well, that and Encolpius is in love with this young boy, and then his best friend basically steals this young boy from him. So it's all kinds of wrong straight from the get-go, and it's just ugliness, right? Like these two are friends, and what's really funny is they go through this whole journey until the very end. They're like with each other, but they're like backstabbing each other at every end. They're just so real ugly and nasty to each other, and they're still friends, but the ugliness and nastiness is not given a kind of, well, we can argue about whether it's given a beauty or not, because what is beauty? Because when you're saying this is one of Fellini's best looking films, they would be shocked by what you're saying is their best looking film, depending on who the audience member is, because the whole nature of beauty is all, what is beauty? But again, I'm going to say it in a simple way. It's not beautiful, this jealousy and this backstabbing friendship, but it's rather nasty, and it's like looks very ugly, and neither one is like really redeemed, and neither one is really anything like a hero that you would say, okay, I'm on this guy's side. And so how funny it would be to watch a movie like Troy or Gladiator or something and double bill it with this film. It's like it would be very funny experiment to watch that and then this, and then which is very much a critique and a satire of those stories, of those works of literature, or of simplistic histories of grandeur, and like you said, real men. And obviously, fortitude plays a big part in one of the insecurities that drives the film.
I think we can also look at this film as a kind of a wider critique of like societal decadence or hedonism. You don't just have to think about Rome, but you can also think how these things are part of our current world. Like when we see this, we always talk about escapism and how harmful it can be, but there we see that current day hedonism, decadence, people just want to watch Marvel movies and never use their brain, and they again just don't want to challenge themselves. They always want to be comfortable. But of course, the fact that causes that is our society around us. It's not necessarily the individual's fault that they fall into escapism. And of course, in this film, we also see like a whole society that's like really corrupt and disgusting. It's not just these people that we follow, but it's the whole thing all together. So yeah, so we can draw many parallels from that to our current day, even though it's a totally different world. And like you said, it's kind of like an alien world, and that's maybe why the narrative is so fragmentary and weird, because obviously it's 2000 years in the past. It's alien to us, we cannot fully understand it, so that's why our understanding of the period is also very fragmentary and incomplete and weird and not totally accurate or not totally chronological or how it was. So that's kind of how the narrative actually fits the historical ideas of the film as well, and also the aesthetic.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, yeah, just the idea of trying to get into, and yeah, that's just the thing. It's like I'm teleporting you back 2000 years, and trust me, you're not gonna necessarily look at that and think, oh yeah, I it totally connects, like even like what you're sharing, right? That idealization of the culture, and but also we're not trying to denounce, because yes, there are things that came out of it, but you don't really think about the context where it came out from. Or if you celebrate the few people who are sane, but they were also executed and killed and exiled and all that. It's not that we imagine it like those philosophers were walking around and they were the most important people. They are actually the least important people. They had to preach against that insanity. And so here you're gonna be shown that insanity, which enhances that. It's like, would you be willing, like you're saying, would you be willing to stand up against that, or voice opposition to that? Because that is the majority. Now, someone can say, well, it's exaggerated, perhaps, maybe not, but it's art after all. So you're allowed to give that voice. But I feel like there's so many little things in there too, that like there's that scene where they roast the pig and they basically forgot to take all the insides out and they roast it as a whole, and they like cut it, and all the offal and intestines like come out cooked, and all the basically the poor people, like they run and they just start eating it. I'm like, that's wickedly clever, right? Because he's basically sitting there to say, how did society come out to be this way, that certain parts of the animal we ended up eating, and then certain parts of the animal are like part of the culinary uh, like culinary choices of people of a certain class. uh, to do that in just the scene, that's just kind of hilarious and offensive and off-putting as well. Yet that nugget is planted in there, right? Like, how did you come to just start, like, eat the kidneys, or know you could eat them, or you could whatever, and then he makes it into this funny situation where the people just forgot to basically gut the pig before roasting it, and the emperor gets mad and they remove it, and all the poor people eat all the stuff the emperor doesn't want to eat, and the emperor gets what's best on the animal. And so there's a lot of strong critique there. Strong.
Yeah, and it really focuses on those types of smaller things as well, and finds something interesting to say about the society through those types of small things like food. Because often when we again think about history, we always say that it's written by the winners and not the losers, and it's all about the winners. It's about the great philosophers and the great emperors and the great generals and the great gladiators and stuff like that. But this movie shows that there is more to the story, and it doesn't make it about that, but it shows the disgusting side of it all, like we said.
Yeah. Yeah, and that takes a lot of courage, and that's also like a filmmaker that is from the country. The history is tied to that country, and we discussed that many times. I think in Nostalgia we discussed this, and in Special Day we discussed this imaginary history that you create to create kind of pride, and then it feeds things like fascism, and destructive movements, and this film is right along with that, right? It's basically trying to ensure that you don't do that, that you construct this story that's self-serving, and that creates this imaginary past, and this past where we were so great, and we were so intellectual, and like you said, we were manly men, and we followed certain roles, and no, you didn't. I mean, it was anything goes. It wasn't this structured thing. It was anything goes. Is would you, Are you excited by that prospect? Would you want to return to that? So it's yeah, it's a in a way very mature uh, film as well. It's a risky film, and then it takes the elements of Italian culture and art and weaves them in, which is just incredible. Um,
God, this made me think about like a crazy teacher I had in fifth and sixth grade, because he just said, look at what they did in ancient Rome. They were so civilized, and they had this and this. But what are we proud in Finland these days? Nokia and car tire brands and things like that. He said that, but they had like sewer system back in like 2,000 years ago already. Like, how can we be proud of this stuff now? Like, yeah,
yeah, and they like built that sewer system with like slave labor, like no problem. They just didn't even think of those people like human beings. Like, yeah, that. But yeah, you're right, and I think that's exactly why Fellini did it. That's why I'm just so amazed that he did that, and in the way he took it down, um, because you could think that that's going to be very offensive to a lot of people who are very proud by the achievements of that culture. But at the same time, yeah, you have to think of the whole, and the way, and this is what I mean. This is where in that way, even the depictions are not meant to offend or stereotype certain groups of people from certain parts of the world, but to show how terribly you thought of them, and how how you use them. And so, and then on top of that, like you said, it's bringing in elements. So like I said, I haven't also read Petronius's that classical poem or whatever it is, Satyricon. So I don't know what that does, but clearly in this, the elements of the journey are meant to mirror some of the storylines we find in some of the great classical literature that we all appreciate and admire. Going on the Odyssey, and then ending on a slave ship, and ending up in strange lands with like strange people, and then you know even presence of magical powers and all this kind of stuff. So it's like it's a full out satire.
I think going back to the idea of how we look at history, I think like one of the biggest flaws of humans is that how bad we are at looking at the past, and that happens both at a micro level, that okay, we are really bad at looking at our own flaws and our own trauma, but then also societally, when it's about our group, it's really hard to
Mm.
talk about the flaws of your own society, your own country, because you have such love and patriotism. But yeah, Fellini again is so bold that he doesn't really care about that at all, and he does what he wants here. So that's great. But I think okay, you mentioned the novel or poem. I don't know again that much about it, but again, this is a very loose adaptation of it apparently, and I heard that the poem doesn't like have an ending. Also, I think it was unfinished, or maybe that it didn't survive altogether. So I think yeah, this film is probably like very very different than the novel is, or
Yeah,
poem is, whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah. Except that this film does end abruptly as well. So I guess he was also trying to. So it's just he's being very very clever. I mean, the most impressive thing is just even the sets like that, to construct that alternate reality and all the sets and all that is so insane. And in a way it's very cheeky too, because it's that, oh, but this is taking place on a stage, so all, is it that Shakespeare, all of the world is a stage, or is it like what we're discussing in Revit? Oh well, don't take it too seriously because it's just happening on a stage. It's all made up. It's all for entertainment. It's all for shock value. Like, which one? Which one is it? And he likes to. It seems like he's playing with that as well. Oh, it's just a story. Oh, it's just a stage play. It's not real Rome. It's constructed Rome. It's parallel Rome. Oh, it's alien Rome. It's if Rome was an alien culture, but Rome was an alien culture in a way. So he's just walking that line really cleverly.
Yeah, and I think many people will see this is as a film that only has shock value.
Yeah.
And again, many people are very prude, so they won't like the sexual
yeah.
stuff in this and things like that, and they will see it as just pointless and stupid and decadent and wrong, and that makes the film bad. And again, many people think that when you show something like this in a film, that it celebrates it, even though it necessarily doesn't do it. I
Yes.
don't think this film celebrates this type of behavior. It just shows it in a very over-the-top forum. But again, Rome was a very over-the-top society, or at least our perception of it is very over-the-top.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it made me reflect a bit too, because we're at that point in our societies as well where satire is important, and yet we're also trying to make sure that it's not used in a way to erode the positive progress we're doing in terms of uh, you know uh, dealing with like difference in society and diversity and all that, but it does make you feel like that part is temporarily lost, like you're not able to make a satire for that reason because it can get so easily misinterpreted, like you said, because yeah, it's true that someone could just see it as Fellini's gone crazy, and that's what I thought too. That I was like, given what he made before, someone might say, "Oh, he's lost it. Like he's just lost his mind. Like he's just in his old age and his later years. Like he's lost all sense. Like he used to make these stories like La Strada, and now what is this? It's just depravity and debauchery and all that." And I don't, like you're saying, it takes a very subtle approach to say, "Hey, that doesn't mean he's standing for it. He's not doing it to entertain you and excite you and titillate you. He's doing it to make you think that before I think I know a certain period in history or how it was from day to day for all people." And that's the thing, that sometimes you're also thinking of it as in very select scopes, the life of this person, but not the life of all people. Like, what did it look like if you're at the very bottom of Rome? What did your life look like? So there is all that in there. And like you said as well, the free for all, because it wasn't just, as I read it, it's not just about any queerness or anything like that. It's they're pansexuals, or it's like anything goes sexuality, and that sexuality didn't necessarily have to do with love, but had to do with all kinds of things. Had to do with just anxiety, had to do with violence, had to do with jealousy, had to do with control, had to do with possession. So you know um, in a way, you can celebrate how far we've come as well in some ways, uh, where sexuality is not just that. Now it's sexuality is, for love and connection and affection as well.
And I start thinking that, like, what does this film say about like society and societal norms and kind of people's connection to that? Because we see this, the whole place is this crazy hedonistic place, and then the people are all like that. So it kind of shows that what society is. It kind of creates the people that are kind of images of the society, or you could say the other way around as well. So because everything is hedonistic, there aren't like very strong kind of values or rules here. So people can do whatever they want and anything goes. So that's what end up happening, that people do these crazy things because that's just what the society itself is. So it's very different from like Margaret Thatcher's idea that there is no society, there are only individuals. So because here we see that again the society and individuals are very clear mirrors to each other, and they are very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Because how and why did people change? I mean, the question is there. If everyone was like that, how and why did you change? And like you said, because societies changed, the norms that drove society, the belief systems that drove society changed, and that in turn changed the perception and behaviors of the people. So yeah, I tend to agree with what you're saying. That is definitely a thing being explored there, because the way everyone is behaving, like they're perfectly fine with everything because they just think that's the order of things. So I should be fine with it. And if anyone was contending with that, like that quote I shared uh, with you, yeah, so where the emperor's getting upset because someone is trying to challenge one of those norms. So
And I think, okay, we mentioned the sexuality thing here as well, but that obviously relates to the social norms as well. And we often do think that whether like sexuality, how much it is determined by social norms and how much it is determined by just genetics and like the natural order of things. But here, like everybody is bisexual or pansexual, however you want to put it. So is it because the society allows that everybody is like that, or are people naturally like that, but then maybe the society can like repress those things? Because of course sometimes people like speculate that if there were no homophobes in the world, like would all people be like bisexual or something, or wouldn't they? Like that's very interesting idea. If it's all societal norms, then maybe people would be that. But then if it's very much determined by the natural order, then obviously it wouldn't be like that. And of course, from the animal kingdom, we know that again animals can be homosexuals as well and bisexual. So that maybe tells us that there is also a natural angle there, as animals don't have like a similar type of societal norms, obviously, as we do. So those are like very interesting conversations as well.
yeah, I think and that's definitely a conversation that's happening in the film, because a person's sexuality is not what defines their. Okay, I mean, we can argue whether they had an exact conception of masculinity or not, because there was a kind of virility and potence, and potency is what they kind of valued. Uh, so it seems in the film, but not necessarily like you're a man and you're not a man. So it's like, just because your sexuality is not tied to you being a man, but he's very much threatened by his impotence, as one of the portions of the journey goes through, and he goes through all these ways of trying to restore or to cure his impotence. So I think that ties into what you're saying as well, because that gives things to think about. Why is this defined as a result of this alone? Uh, and yeah, is it biological, or is it like societally created? And it's societally imposed, and if it is, then it's just a notion, but it's not reality. And so why do we give it so much validation?
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting how we see the Roman Empire and also ancient Greece through this lens that like maybe queerness was more allowed back then. And again, there are always these like the philosophers had like young boy lovers and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, and even the gladiators were having sex with each other and stuff like that. But then I've kind of heard sometimes, I'm not sure like what is true, but that it's often kind of overplayed, like how accepted homosexuality was back then, that there was still some like shame element there, and it wasn't that accepted in many of its different forms, but some forms of homosexuality were accepted, but there were also lots of kind of discrimination back then, and sometimes it's kind of overplayed these days, like how accepting the ancient Rome and ancient Greece were for this type of thing. But I'm not sure what the actual facts are, but I've always heard this kind of debate about this going. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think in some ways, I can't know, but I feel like that's what maybe one of Fellini's aims was in making this, is stop looking to this period to look for yourself, because they are like as real to us or as connected to us as, you know, some aliens would be. So focus on where you are today and really think about you as a society today. And the reason I sort of feel that is, you know, I have to make my nice Jordan Peterson comment every now and then, but he's making this documentary about the West, and well, I couldn't even watch the whole trailer, even though it's like 30 seconds or 1 minute. But I watched it like 5 seconds where he says in the intro, "You're a historical being, so you should know like where you come from." And I'm like, that's the exact kind of thing that Fellini was trying to break. Who is you? To think you come from that is insane, because you don't come from that. Like, you know, even if you're part of the countries that you identify as the West, Rome wasn't the whole West. Rome was a city state, and then it took over other city states and regions, and those regions weren't Rome, and those people didn't become Romans. So I think if Fellini's aim was that, I think that's another brilliant aim to say, why do we keep going and looking there, trying to solve, oh, who were we and where do we come from? It's insane to do that. It was a time and a place, and you're in a time and a place. So instead of focusing on your time and a place, you are all obsessed with constructed realities. And maybe just like what we discussed in Rivet, maybe that's why he made it like a stage as well, because to say it's a constructed reality, you construct one, I can construct this reality, and in the end of the day, we have no idea what it actually was and what it looked like in totality. So why are we so obsessed with connecting to it? We can study it, we can think about it, but trying to connect it and then finding our roots in that thing, it may be a form of insanity.
Yeah, and it's not really good for progressing as a society when you just look back and think about the glory days and wanting to go back to them. Especially as we always talk about that again, people just have these myths of the past, but it's not how the past really was. So
Yes.
there's nothing to go back to. We cannot go back to it because we don't even know what it was. But of course, these people like Jordan Peterson, they always just Western civilization, yeah, the great philosophy, Judeo-Christian values, but they never talk about slavery or colonialism or imperialism or all these bad things. Just ignore all of that, and yeah, let's just talk about the achievements and white people created everything that's good in the world and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even in that time period, like you said, it's myths, and even in that time period, they had a very loose relationship between actual history and documenting and myth. So they were like constructing their history and storytelling in a mythological fashion, and bringing supernatural elements into everything. So if you read something, that doesn't mean that that's history. I mean, maybe Herodotus was accurate, but then people say, okay, half of that was probably like exaggerated and made up. So you don't actually have a real document. It's all imaginary, and that's why it's easy to construct that myth. Yet it's dangerous if you don't really realize it's myth. Like, it's make believe. You're sitting there and saying, I think it was like that, and they were walking around, and yeah, they either looked really nice with philosopher with the toga, the inspirational philosopher, or it was like insane. Like, the streets were covered in blood at times, and that there's just like crazy stuff going on. And it might have been there might have been a sewage system, but then it might have been kind of it would have still been kind of offensive to you. It might have been a sewage system, but it probably still stank, because they didn't have our technology. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, like I said earlier, again, history is written by the winners. So if a
mm,
Roman emperor, after they won a battle, writes a story about how they won the battle, it doesn't mean that the battle actually went through like that.
mm,
Of course, they're gonna glorify their own achievements and their own side, and then talk down the other side. Yeah. So again, like we just talked about, history is all. I'm not all, but much of it is myth, and much of it is not true. And the further back we go, the more alien it is, and more hard it is to connect to it and know what it was really like. So,
yeah, 100%.
but is there any like other thematic angles that we could talk about with this film? We've kind of focused on history and the perception of history. Then we talked about the sexuality thing a bit, but is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's also. I mean, I would say he's probably playing with the ideas of beauty, which we also discussed as well, right? Because is it beautiful, like what Fellini's done? Is there beauty in this art, or is there not beauty in this art? And I think that's definitely going on, because I think he's fairly known for also making like beautiful looking films. I don't know. I haven't seen them, so you have seen all his films, but uh, to make that and then make films that look more conventionally beautiful or were beautiful to other people, maybe he is playing with those ideas of beauty in art as well.
Yeah, his other films look very different and they look quite beautiful, but I wouldn't say that Fellini was like one of the biggest visual masters of that era. I think Antonioni has better looking films, and many other directors of that time
Mm,
have better looking films, but Fellini films still looked really nice. And we often talk about with Fellini that he has this kind of circus type of element in his
mm,
films, like again in La Strada, for example, but I think also here how it is just so intense and weird and circus like.
mm. I,
But
I
the
did feel
visual,
that.
yeah, I was just gonna say with the visuals that, yeah, obviously I don't find all the disgusting things beautiful, but more like again the angles, the color palette, and things like that. And obviously later on the film, I mean, at first it's looks kind of disgusting, but when we get those some of the outside shots and the boats and
Mm, mm,
things like that, those look absolutely stunning. I think. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I'm glad you also mentioned the circus element, because yeah, he is. Even the ship sails on it. There's a kind of performance circus element with spectacle and different kinds of entertainment. So yeah, there's like the major circusy spectacle to this film, and things going in different on in the different rings of the circus. So like you said, yeah, one is like in the Rome city itself, and then there's the boats in the ocean, and then there's like foreign lands, and so it's like, yeah, it's like a three ring circus, like. So there's definitely the spectacle aspect, yeah. spectacle as entertainment.
And okay, what you said about beauty, I think there is kind of like a huge spectrum of different aesthetic and beauty here that we see, like people from all walks of life and lots of different types of both men and women. But then also the visual style of the film again changes, like I just said, some of the disgusting stuff, like in these kind of close quarters, and then we have those beautiful kind of majestic spectacle like outside shots. So we see like a really big spectrum of different types of aesthetic here.
Yeah. And then you have like beauty, and then because sometimes we think, okay, beauty, like beautiful people can't do ugly things. So there's like these, both and Colpesius and Asiltas, they're both very beautiful, right? They're both very attractive in their physique, in their everything, and then there's the viciousness and the competitiveness and and the things they're willing to do, because we don't associate beauty with wanting to do all that kind of things. Like basically, Encopius will jump on anything as long as it's promised that he'll get his impotence cured. So, we don't think about that kind of desperation and insecurity tied with something that's beautiful.
Yeah, inner beauty and outer beauty don't always kind of come in the same person. So often it is that you have one of those things only. So
yeah, but I'm interested to watch it again in the near future, because I really want to know, maybe follow the journey of Encopius and see, okay, are there additional things thematically kind of going on with how he's responding to the things going on, and
this would be great to see in the cinema, but we'll see if I ever have the opportunity. And I've seen a couple of Fellini films in the cinema, but not this one. So.
Yeah, this would be crazy in the cinema. It'd be insane. And if you went in blind watch, if you went to the cinema and you knew nothing about it, and you were seeing it for the first time in the cinema, I wonder how you would react.
But some of the posters for this film are already like quite crazy, so I think people might expect that at least it's not like a traditional film, but obviously we won't expect all the craziness.
Yeah. I don't know if you'd expect this level, because there's kind of like, even the Criterion cover, it's like, it's intriguing, and you think, oh, it's going to be kind of like maybe a horrorish like devil story, but not of this level, because it's all kinds of camp as well. It's like very campy. It's very like, it's totally unexpected, like what it is. At least I felt that. I was like, nothing would have prepared me for this.
And one of my favorite British directors, Peter Greenaway, has really kind of adopted the aesthetic of Satyricon to his films. Like he uses lots of red, and he makes these kind of grotesquely beautiful films. So I think he has really adapted this style. So when you get into his films, they really look like this.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I like it.
And of course, later on the year, we have a couple more Fellini films, Nights of Cabiria and 8.5, which are a bit more traditional types of films.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, but we can now wrap it up. I'm glad that Altaz got so much out of the film, as I again didn't know what he was gonna think, and I started thinking that maybe he's gonna hate all of my recommendations from now on. So I'm glad that it's not true.
No. And I haven't hated any recommendations, like I said.
But now what we have to do is, again, tell you, our audience, the next two films that we are going to talk about. So I'm extremely excited about these two. So first we have Tsai Ming Liang's feature debut, Rebels of the Neon God. And I'm for some reason, just my mind associates our podcast with Chiming Liang. So every time I think about our podcast, I think about Chiming Liang. So I think he's gonna be a director that Altaz is gonna really get into. So
Yeah, I'm very excited to see that as well. I've been really enjoying all the explorations in Taiwanese cinema that I'm having.
and you are also gonna see a couple of Ming Liang's films in the cinema.
Yeah, that's right.
And we are gonna talk about one of those in the podcast as well, called The River. So Altaz is gonna see it, I think, in late September. So I think the podcast episode for that will be like the first podcast of October.
Yeah, that'll be exciting.
Yeah. But then with Rebels of the Neon God, we have another new director for Altaz. It's Lee Chang-dong with his film Oasis, which will be a very interesting film to discuss. Again, it has kind of one like problematic element that I think can turn some people off. So we'll see what Altaz thinks of it.
Yeah. All right, yeah. Time to crack open that box set.
Yeah, I think it's the best film of the box set, but yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will be a good combo, a South Korean movie and a Taiwanese movie. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm enjoying all that stuff that we're doing with Korean cinema, Taiwanese cinema. So I'm very excited.
But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts about Fellini and Satyricon. I know many people on YouTube seem to kind of hate Fellini for some reason, but hopefully there are some Fellini fans in my audience as well. Well, Tony is at least. But yeah, don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.